Hello, YouTube. Russia's nuclear heart continues to beat in 2023. That's from the Russian newspapers. A new place of power is being built in the homeland of the nuclear project. It's very interesting. So let me tell you what's going on, because you won't find it in most of the US or Western media. They're not paying attention sometimes to important developments around the world. You see, the National Center of Physics and Mathematics is being opened in the city where the nuclear shield of Russia was being forged. The technological future of the country is associated with this work. The city of Sarov, also known as Arzamas 16, is a place where, by a whim of fate, the spiritual, the thermonuclear, religious, and scientific ideas came together. The Chronicles of the Atomic Project says that the modern history of Sarov begins in 1945, when the head of the secret Soviet police, Lavrenti Beria, at that time he was not as yet person executed, chose the site for the Soviet Los Alamos. The Americans built their own laboratory for the development of nuclear weapons in a remote desert. The Soviets could not afford the luxury of building from scratch. You see, the USSR was lagging behind in development, and they had to catch up. Therefore, they were looking for a paradoxical place, so to say, remote, but already inhabited. It has to be difficult to reach, but it was within easy reach from the Soviet capital. And such unique sign turned out to be the monastery of the Dormition, or the Свято-Успенская Sarovskaya Pustынь in Russian. Several hundred monks who bowed to the Heavenly Father at that location, they were evicted long before the Second World War began. And so, at the behest of the father of nations, Joseph Stalin, the laboratories of the nuclear center started working within the walls of the monastery. The cells of the monks were now inhabited by candidates and doctors of physical and mathematical sciences, who began to forge the nuclear shield of the motherland. An 18-hour working day was considered to be the norm. The concept of vacation did not exist. The dining room, which was located in one of the churches, worked around the clock. The beginning of the Soviet atomic project, or nuclear project, dates back to the late 1930s. The issue of the deployment of work on nuclear subjects was put up for discussion by the Presidium of the USSR Academy of Sciences. The result of this discussion was the creation of a commission on the uranium issue, which included quite prominent Soviet scientists. And Kurchatov was appointed to be the head of the entire nuclear project. To solve this difficult problem, he was given the opportunity to involve scientists and specialists from any research institutes and universities in the country. So you've been watching recently the Manhattan Project movie and so forth. So learn about this. In 1943, the State Defense Committee decided to create the country's first scientific research institution, which was supposed to deal with the nuclear challenge. It was named the Laboratory of Measuring Instruments, number 2 of the USSR Academy of Sciences. Well, since the end of 1945, there had been a search for a place to locate this top secret facility. So a week later, in April of 1946, under the heading Soviet Secret, a special file, it was adopted by the resolution of the Council of Ministers of the USSR. Number 805327, on the creation of the Design Bureau at the Laboratory number 2 of the USSR Academy of Sciences. The newly created Design Bureau was assigned number 11. The task of the organization was set very clearly and precisely to create a product that is the atomic bomb. This specified resolution also approved the management of the new facility. Deputy Minister of Transport Engineering Zernov was appointed head of the KB-11, and Professor Khariton, remember this name, he was appointed to be the chief designer. So, in February of 1947, by the decree of Council of Ministers of the USSR, signed by Joseph Stalin, KB-11 was classified as a special regime enterprise with the transformation of its territory in a closed regime zone, forbidden territory, out of access. That is most restricted access. Now, the village of Sarov was removed from the administrative subordination of the Moldovan Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic and excluded from all accounting materials. It became invisible. The site had operated in strict secrecy. Until the mid-1950s, KB-11 employees and their family members could not leave the zone even on vacation, only on a business trip. Permanent passes for people living in the zone were introduced much later. To work at KB-11, scientists, engineers, and production workers were recruited from the largest scientific and production centers of the Soviet Union: Moscow, Leningrad, Gorky, Kazan, Kharkov, and Sverdlovsk. Experts from various fields were concentrated at that site. The research laboratories and design departments of KB-11 began to expand their activities in the spring of 1947. And in parallel, the first production workshops of pilot plants number 1 and number 2 were created. That's how the village at that time of Sarov became the location of the first Soviet nuclear center. Apparently, the very aura of this place favors the appearance of saints and great martyrs. So, the city of nuclear weapons builders that center was guarded according to the principle of the national border. So, if you are a foreigner, I would not advise to be curious and to travel to that site. But those who can visit Sarov mentioned that in the Museum of Nuclear Weapons, there is quite interesting exhibits to be seen. One of them is the personal train carriage of the chief designer of the atomic project, Yuri Khariton. He had such authority that the country's leadership actually perceived him to be as a Soviet saint. Fearing the academician Khariton's priceless life not to be caught by a ridiculous incident, he was forbidden to fly on airplanes and to drive a car. Therefore, Khariton, along with his guards, traveled around the USSR in an unremarkable, but only from the outside, saloon car, so to say. By the way, Sergei Korolev, the creator of the missiles on which the Khariton's products were planned to be delivered to the theater of military operations, he was not subject of such a ban, but he did have his personal plane. You should look at my videos about Soviet UFO history and, of course, Soviet space development and exploration to understand the role of Sergei Korolev, bright scientist whose life was cut short by the years spent in the concentration camps of the Socialist Soviet Union. Well, not long ago, a monument to another icon of the nuclear project, Andrei Sakharov, was unveiled in Sarov. The bronze dissident and godfather of the hydrogen bomb sits hunched on a granite slab and wonders where the atomic genie released from the bottle will eventually lead mankind to. But listen, I have nothing but respect for Andrei Sakharov. He was a courageous and kind person, bright scientist, of course, and fearless defender of human rights. He was hounded by Soviet leaders, whom he challenged later in his life. And in my younger years, when I was a young man, I helped smuggle his books into the Soviet Union, of which I am proud. If we had more people like him, I think the fate of the Soviet Union would have changed long before, and a democratic and prosperous Russia or changed Soviet Union would have been in the place of what happened later. He was a brave man. Well, you probably already guessed that Sarov just doesn't tolerate too much fuss and doesn't like too much attention. Well, you see, this was the case until recently. But for several years now, the territory of the nuclear center has been studded with towers of construction cranes, like a hedgehog with needles. New laboratories, educational and residential buildings are being erected one after another, and numerous delegations of scientists have become very frequent in that city. What's happening? It turns out that a new mega project is being conceived in the homeland of the nuclear project. Before, perhaps it's even cooler than the previous one. The National Center for Physics and Mathematics, NCFM in Russian abbreviation, is being launched in Sarov. Its creators face a number of ambitious tasks. One of the main ones is to catch up and overtake the rest of the world in the development of artificial intelligent systems. And not only that, we just don't know how much more. There's only so much you can find in Russian media, of course, but even what has been learned is fantastic. So why does the country need this center? Russian reporters from Komsomolskaya Pravda talked about this with the scientific director of the NCFM, academician Alexander Sergeyev. Today there is a situation in science that has a direct parallel with the beginning of the atomic project. Academician Sergeyev is convinced. If we are talking about nuclear weapons and nuclear energy, they were born as a response to the new physics that appeared in the 1930s and 1940s. These are breakthroughs in nuclear physics and quantum mechanics and the discovery of uranium fission. They led to the creation of a nuclear weapons complex and nuclear energy. And now something is emerging in different areas of physics that allows us to say with confidence, we are once again on the verge of tremendous breakthrough. For example, artificial intelligence will be made by photonic brains. What horizons has science decided to look beyond this time? This is evidenced by the projects of the Mega Science class, which are planned to be launched on the basis of the NCFM by 2030. There are 3 of them, and world-class scientific results can be expected from them. For example, a photonic computer. What is it? We live in the digital age based on the electronic computing machines. Here, information storage and processing are based on the properties of electrons, and a photonic computer runs on photons. These are particles of light that can also process data. The NCFM plans to create a machine with a capacity of several dozen zettaflops. For comparison, electronic supercomputers in the world have now reached the level of exaflops, 10 to the 18th degree of operations per second. That is, our photonic computer should work with a performance 40 orders of magnitude higher. What is it for? There is a class of operations that photonic computers will handle in order of magnitude better. First of all, we're talking about the development of artificial intelligence systems. Next, XL exawatt laser. What is it? Russian scientists will create the most powerful laser in the world. Its radiation will be so enormous that scientists will practically be able to obtain matter and antimatter from a vacuum in the laboratory. What is it for? In practice, this will give an impetus to the industry of high-power industrial lasers, metal cutting or welding, production of modern chips for microelectronics, etc. Well, we can only guess what etc. stands for. multifunctional electron accelerator. What is it? Scientists will collide electrons with each other in the installation and see what happens. What is it for? The periodic table describes the structure of the world at the atomic level. Later, scientists came up with a standard model that describes the world order at the level of nuclear matter, that is, at the level of smaller bricks on the universe. However, there are deeper layers of matter. Nuclear fission or fusion processes have given people the opportunity to use the power of atomic and thermonuclear energy. But mankind will need even more powerful sources of energy. To do this, you need to figure out how the microcosm works. Why is the world center being created in this forbidden or closed city? The academician Sergeyev claims these world-class installations will make the Russian Center for Physics and Mathematics a mecca for scientists around the world. To work for them, researchers will come from Sarov from all over the world. But here an interesting question arises. Alexander Mikhailovich, he was asked, science is international. It follows the path of erasing borders. Why has the idea to create a center in a closed city was born? After all, this can become a barrier to contact with foreign scientists. You are probably right. Anyone who wants to work at the forefront of knowledge, of course, must interact with the world's leading experts, explained the academician, because no one can compete with the world community alone. Indeed, communication with foreign colleagues is difficult at this time interval. But this is not only due to the fact that Federal Nuclear Center is located nearby. This is a situation in which Russian entire science has found itself. There's nothing to be done about it. Russian contacts were mainly focused on Europe and the United States. Now they will have to be rebuilt in a different direction. Well, the war is out there. It's like the second year of the war invasion of Ukraine, and Russia has been isolated in many ways. That's what he is hinting at. Anyway, why Sarov and not Moscow or Nizhny Novgorod? Well, the academician already said that we are on the verge of great scientific breakthroughs. Most likely, these are nuclear physics, accelerators, lasers. That is, those areas where Russian scientific schools are the strongest. And the Federal Nuclear Center in Sarov, where more than 20,000 scientists work, is the most powerful organization, not only in the country, but also, at least, in Europe. But such projects cost a lot of money. Where can Russia get them, especially now? And this is the second reason why they are in Sarov, said academician Sergeyev. For the last 20 to 25 years, they have been crying all the time that their business is not invested in science, as it happens in countries that are the locomotive of modern technology. They're all waiting for the state to come and give them money, referring to Russian scientists. But Rosatom Corporation is a business structure. And if we look at the history of the issue, nuclear project, nuclear energy, then they already have experience in how to translate scientific knowledge into technology. And there is an understanding that the country's future and technological sovereignty will be based on other technologies. This understanding made Rosatom come and invest a lot of money in the NCFM. The academician Sergeyev can say this is the long-awaited arrival of private business in Russia into science. Rosatom, Russian corporation headquartered in Moscow, that specializes in nuclear energy, nuclear non-energy goods, and high-tech products. Established in 2007, the non-profit organization comprises more than 350 enterprises, including scientific research organizations, a nuclear weapons complex, and the world's only nuclear icebreaker fleet. And that will be important when the confrontation for the Arctic will come. but the confrontation may not be only among the terrestrial powers, and I've talked about it in my other videos, most likely with somebody with another intelligence, non-terrestrial intelligence. Also, he mentioned that scientists that serious science is not comfortable in megacities. Artificial intelligence is great, but in order for it to work, you need a lot of people with a high level of natural intelligence. And where can you get them? The NCFM decided to create its own factory for the production of geniuses. Academic buildings of the new forge of knowledge, the University of Moscow, State University Sarov, they're being built in that city of Sarov. Lectures are given here not only by professors of Moscow State University, but also by luminaries of science from academic institutions. While the construction is underway, about 150 undergraduates and postgraduates study there. In the near future, it is planned to put 1,000 people at their desks. And the godfathers of the new mega project are not shy about choosing the means to motivate talented guys and girls. The scholarship of a graduate student is 55,000 rubles. You can do your own conversion. It fluctuates. A graduate student receives at least 75,000 rubles. Not bad. For a graduate who has decided to stay working at the nuclear center, a conversation about salary with an employer begins with a figure of 100,000 rubles. Mansions are being built for students, which the Russian language today doesn't dare to call dormitories, and professors are being settled in townhouses. But with digital youth who value the lifestyle of migratory birds so much, they want to get into the wilderness of the Moldovan forest and connect their lives with the regime facility. According to a world experience, it is clear that serious science is uncomfortable in megacities. According to the creators of the NCFM, there's a high background level of extraneous noise, politics, business, traffic jams. It's distracting. All over the world, from Silicon Valley to the Novosibirsk Akademgorodok, there are many examples that science works better in places especially equipped for compact livings of hermits, those who want to get away from all this noise and distractions. But he would not call this place a remote, secluded place. Academician Sergeyev, it will be in full view of everyone soon. During the last visit of the president of the country, meaning Putin, to that city, it was in the early September, he asked scientists, "What can I do for you?" And the youth asked, "Vladimir Vladimirovich, please help us to open the airport." There is an airport in the city, but it is in a closed area. An opening means regular open flights. And Putin said, "I will help you. Give me your suggestions." And we see that the Diveevo, Arzamas, Sarov cluster will develop rapidly. Huge funds are being invested there. What shape will the forge of the nuclear weapons take? Today, Sarov is stuck in the space between two different eras. In part, it still lives in the USSR. There is a low crime rate in a closed city. It's not fearful for parents to let children go outside. There are many sports clubs and a decent level of education in schools. On the other hand, against the modest background of Soviet architecture, luxurious ensembles of monasteries are flourishing more and more magnificently. After all, Sarov had been a religious center for 300 years. Now the huge monastery complex of the Holy Dormition has been transferred to the church, to the Russian Eastern Orthodox Church. Temples and buildings have been restored and reconstructed. However, only 4 monks live in the monastery. Nuclear physicists are in no hurry to join the ranks of local monks. But against the background of the familiar two-faced old Sarov, the features of this third modern hypostasis associated with the NCFM will soon appear. There's talk that Sarov will be open. It will cease to be a closed regime city, and a new page will begin in its story. Well, one way or another, the country of Russia has another place of power, as they call it. And we really do not know all the projects that would be developed there, but I'm sure they will be very interesting. But I got to tell you this, I have no doubts. UFOs will hover over the secret facilities of Sarov, as they have in other parts of the former Soviet Union and modern Russia since the 1950s. And you can see my videos about it, including the Federal Center of Russia that I mentioned before. It will be like a magnet to them. And it's a very interesting development in the history of modern ufology. So that's what I wanted to let you know today. Keep your eyes open, and we'll see what the new scientific center will produce one day. Thank you for your attention to my work, and please support my research if you can through the links you'll find in the description to this video. Please tell others about my channel and like my videos.